All right, everybody, I'd like to get started. We're running a little behind, but that's okay. I'd really like to welcome everybody here tonight. Thank you for coming. Bert isn't here to do the presentation and the introduction, so I'm trying to fill in as best I can for him. But before I begin, I wanted to make sure that everybody signs in. We would like to get your email address or regular address, however you want to receive notices. We do these seminars at least once or twice a year, and we're creating a mailing list, so we would like to get you on so that next time we're able to just email out and notify you that we're going to have a seminar. Also, we've got all kinds of information over there from the Arboretum and from the Village of Glen Ellyn. I forgot I'm the Village Forester, Peggy Drescher, in case you don't know. And then, if everybody could turn their cell phones off. If you don't, then it rings, we will charge $5. Okay, well, I want to again thank you for coming to our annual tree care seminar. This fall seminar is called Our Community Forest, What It's Worth and How to Make It Work for You. We have three very knowledgeable speakers that will touch on the following: how trees affect our ecosystem, using trees for energy savings, how trees contribute to the value of your home, how trees control water runoff, and wood utilization. I want to point out this beautiful podium here. Edith can talk a little bit more about it later, but it was made from recycled ash wood. I think hopefully everybody's aware of the emerald ash borer, and it's a very destructive pest that has killed over 20 million trees in the Midwest. So we're trying to figure out different ways to use wood instead of just turning it into firewood and mulch. I'm learning, one of the speakers will be speaking on that. And then if you could, after the seminar, after all the speakers are done talking, the table in the back is also full of recycled, reclaimed ash wood. It's actually pretty cool. I forgot my wine bottle though, but there is a wine holder back there, and it's actually pretty neat. So, well, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our first speaker. Edith Macra is a community trees advocate for the Morton Arboretum. Her goal is to connect the rich resources of the Arboretum with area communities to foster stewardship of the trees that comprise the urban forest of the region. She has assisted about 120 communities with issues from A to Z, Arbor Day to zoning issues. She has also catalyzed state, federal, and local agencies and industry groups to prepare for the arrival of the devastating exotic emerald ash borer, which has the capacity to kill 20% of the region's ash trees. She is currently overseeing the 2010 tree census to analyze the region's forest and measure its ecosystem services. Macra earned a BS in forestry from the University of Illinois, and then, I'm sorry, but Western Illinois is a little bit better. I digress. Just kidding. Then started her career at the top of the ladder as an arborist, climbing trees and caring for them. She earned an arborist certification from the International Society of Arboriculture and Massachusetts Arborist Association. She has worked as a community activist on behalf of the trees in Chicago as director of the Neighborhoods Programs of Open Lands. From there, she moved to City Hall as Mayor Daley's first special assistant of urban forestry to champion trees and design comprehensive greening initiatives. Community assistance was at the core of the urban forestry program of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which Macra worked for and then later directed over a 7-year period, providing technical and grant assistance to the 351 municipalities in the state, gave her broad perspective in municipal urban forestry programs, community issues, and opportunities. The Morton Arboretum is a 1,700-acre outdoor museum with collections of more than 3,400 kinds of trees, shrubs, and other plants from 50 countries displayed in the woodlands, gardens, restored tallgrass prairie, and other natural areas. Established in 1922, Joy Morton, founder of the Chicago-based Morton Arboretum Cell Company, and Arboretum's mission is planting and conservation of trees and other plants for a greener, healthier, and more beautiful world. The Arboretum has a highly regarded research program implemented by 16 research scientists working to develop and grow hardy urban trees and other plants related study area. The education program serves over 20,000 students each year with diverse classes and programs. I do want to say Edith is an extremely helpful person to me. She helps us a great deal with everything. So, and I really appreciate her coming because she's really very busy. So, Edith.
Thank you so much for having me. This is certainly not my first time in Glen Ellyn. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. No? Yes. Has anyone not been to the Morton Arboretum? Okay, so we're neighbors and you know us really well. And I just have to say how nice it is for you all to come out. So I've done a lot of community work, as you've heard. Sorry for the long introduction. And I always appreciate anybody getting up off the couch, you know, unplugging, putting respectable clothing on and coming out to community meetings. So kudos to you for doing that, and especially kudos to the Village Environmental Commission and staff for putting this on, because this is extra effort and very much appreciated. So hopefully a very high caliber program that you've got on tonight. And my job is to introduce the value of trees to you. Which I don't have a very hard time with, and I would suspect you all kind of like trees, otherwise you wouldn't be here. So maybe not a real hard sell here, but humor me a little bit. So we'll go over what we like to call benefits of trees or ecosystem services. You'll hear me use that term. And I think because it's evening, I probably wouldn't recommend turning off the lights unless you think you can see the picture better. You want to vote on that? No. Leave it up? No. Okay. And if you would, just enjoy it. I'd rather you not be concerned a lot about taking notes or the information. If you're interested in some tidbit or fact that I have, please let me know. I didn't photocopy all the presentations, but we do have this in places, so I'd rather you just kind of stay with me and enjoy a little bit. So I'll talk about the value of trees in the fact that people love them, and that's definitely an advantage to any of us who are trying to advocate for them. There are also some very measurable benefits, quantifiable benefits of trees or ecosystem services that I'll talk about. And then what we know about the ecosystem services can help us use them either on our own homes, a residential scale, or at the village level in terms of managing our trees to maximize the ecosystem services or the benefits we get. And then I'll tell you a little bit about that tree census, which is one of the tools that we're using to measure trees. This probably is familiar to those of you who serve on a commission. This is actually one of the commissions from Western Springs. People really do have an affection for trees, and this is something that is very well known. I think we all assume that. There was a study that was done by, oh my goodness, Western was involved in the study. Going back a couple of years now, there was an urban forestry professor at Western who was very, very influential in the region. A study was done. They did actually 2 studies over a number of years with municipal officials, and what it boiled down to is the question was, to municipal leaders is how do you feel about trees? And the question, of course, 99% of the respondents said that trees absolutely improve a community appearance. There were more of them, or a little bit less of them, but many of the respondents also agreed that trees improve the quality of life and the health of their community. You can imagine the numbers dropped off a little bit when it said to willingness to invest in them, but certainly they make the communities better, and that's very well accepted and understood. I collect these community surveys, so if you know of some other ones, let me know. But right now I know Kenilworth did a resident survey, and Downers Grove did a resident survey, asking residents to prioritize issues that were important to them. And I will admit, much of this was done sort of during the height of the tear-down trend, looking at impacts of infill development and how it changed community character, and of all of the issues, rate how important each of these attributes are in defining the existing character of Kenilworth. And lousy slide there, pulled it off the internet, trees are by far and above the #1 priority for the residents of Kenilworth in terms of community change. So Downers Grove had similar results. Measurable benefits of trees can be then divided into economic benefits, environmental benefits or ecosystem services, and then social benefits. Probably know this, but trees increase property value. And I'll admit the numbers on this one I think can be, I don't know, I'm not in real estate, but I think there's so many factors affecting the market. These studies were done, I think the one in Georgia was the one that said large specimen trees can increase a property's value by up to 10%. So I would love to have a study done in the Chicago market to see what those really are. Large trees, well-maintained trees, we do know tend to add the most value. Everybody knows about curb appeal, but in terms of the value, the aesthetics, the really measurable value, it has to do with large, well-maintained shade trees. Anybody in real estate know better than that? Or have an opinion? Okay, so residential values for sure, and I was interested to find this study that looked at commercial properties and how that impacted rental rates and the appeal of commercial properties. And of prospective tenants, 92% of them said that landscaping on commercial properties also increased the sales appeal, the appeal of a property. Appraisers also agree that landscaping improves a property's appeal, and that the average rental rates would be improved by about 7%. I believe the study was done in the South as well. Commercial districts, this is a neat study that I think is very applicable to those of us in the western suburbs in the Midwest. This had to do with tree-lined commercial districts, and this is a lot of this boils down to the social benefits, and if people feel good around trees, all of their behaviors are altered for positive benefits or for positive change. And having tree-lined commercial districts, not a shopping mall, but I think residential shopping districts, something along the lines of your downtown, is what the study was based on. They found that well-maintained tree-lined streets increased shoppers' appeal. They were more likely to take frequent shopping trips more often, to spend more time there, and there was a perceived value of goods that was 12% higher. So if you think of spending money in a downtown versus a mall, that I always think of Geneva as kind of the quintessential, is that I'll buy a tchotchke that's more expensive because it's Geneva. You think of the charm and the character, I'd like to think your downtown has the same kind of higher perceived value of goods. And you may be aware of an appraisal system that arborists use, and we use this in assigning a dollar value for all kinds of insurance purposes, and I happen to pull from Peggy's Gems of Glen Ellyn for specific information here. The average value, so if you take the condition of a tree, the species of a tree, and its location of a tree, and it's a formula that you go through, you will come up with a dollar value that is very tested, stood up in court, and that can be very significant. If you see on the slide there that there was one tree in Skokie that appraised for $14,000. This was an unfortunate accident where a developer cut the roots on a very mature white oak and was assessed a fine or a bill for the tree of $14,000 because it was destroyed. Recognize too that not all trees have value. We get awfully excited about these numbers, and you think your tree might be worth $14,000. The average tree, street trees in Glen Ellyn, this is from your Gems of Glen Ellyn, which is a couple of years old, came out to about $1,600, and that's across all conditions and across all species. So of course there's going to be some that are very high and some that are not quite so high. So some trees can even have a negative value. If it's in bad condition and likely to fall down, that tree wouldn't have a dollar value. But in total, the value of the urban forest in Glen Ellyn is about $25 million. Does that sound current enough? And probably don't need to tell you that that helps in terms of advocating for stewardship of the urban forest. Social benefits. So these are not tangible in that we can't put a dollar value on them or quantify them, but social scientists have worked with how we respond to trees around us. And as Peggy said, I worked for Mayor Daley back when he was first starting the tree program. And we got a reporter one time that said, okay, the mayor's from Bridgeport, there are no trees in Bridgeport, what gives with this guy in the trees? You know, what's his motive? And Mayor Daley, in his own very polished and eloquent way, kind of said that trees would make you feel better when you were commuting to work. You know, that people feel better around trees. And you know what the scientists found? He was right. So many of these studies were done in Chicago. There was a kind of a renowned, at least among us urban forestry types, a renowned study that was done in Chicago with the University of Illinois, and some of them were done at Robert Taylor Homes. So what they found, particularly in these Robert Taylor Homes studies, is that they're perfect setup for this project design. There were multiple buildings. Some of them had very nice landscaping. Some of them had very little. And they found in the properties or the buildings that had more trees and landscaping, there was an increased sense of neighborliness, knowing your neighbors better, and that people were more likely to have local friendships and stop and talk to people. When I worked in Chicago, people used to be afraid of the trees. They want to cut down the trees because they, you don't know who's lurking behind them. And they found that actually the testing, that people feel safer when they're well-maintained. It's always well-maintained trees and landscaping around. This was a really interesting one that came out of the Robert Taylor Home study, is that there was a reduced levels of domestic violence in the building, the Robert Taylor Homes building, that had more trees and landscaping. Enhanced child's play. This has an awful lot to do with leave no child inside and what they call nature deficit disorder. Has anybody heard of that? What's the name of the author? Anybody know?
The last child,
Richard Louv.
Thank you. Yeah. Last child in the woods. So nature deficit disorder is they found that when children are outside playing with nature, that when they have 20 minutes of outdoor play, that they focus better on tasks when they're brought inside, and it enhances their ability to cope with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Other benefits, and like I said, this kind of all works under the package of why you would want to spend more in a shopping district that's got good trees, and it improves the mood. Improves health and healing, and this is, again, a renowned study in our world. It's probably 30 years old now, where there were, among the first that looked at trees and health, there were gallbladder patients, and they looked at the recuperation rates for those who had views of trees in nature outside their window versus the patients who looked at a brick wall, and they found that those who were looking at the trees had a quicker recovery rate and required less pain medication than those who did not. And this is parlayed into a really fascinating field having to do with healthcare and the environment. So, and I think that's from Mr. Bean. It cracks everyone up.
Faulty towers.
Faulty towers, thank you. Calming aggressive driving. So they found, this was a study that was done in the Washington area, Washington, D.C., is that given an opportunity to drive through a longer route that was treed, people were more likely to choose the longer route and had lower levels of blood pressure and felt calmer and happier, no surprise, when driving through tree-lined streets. And likewise, improving worker productivity, again, having all to do with how good you feel and the mood. And this increased sense of community and neighborhood satisfaction has more to do with how residents felt about their communities when looking at trees. This had more to do with the roadside perception thing. If a community appeared to have lovely trees, as you do here, is that people who lived in the community felt a better sense of being taken care of and having stewardship and investment in their community. So I'll try to catch up here a little bit on time. Trees conserve energy. Okay. Trees conserve energy, and I have a whole talk on this one, so if you don't stay to the end, the large shade trees can increase your energy conservation or reduce your energy costs by 6.5% over the entire year. And I'll get more into that one. You'll see some very high numbers on this. Probably, trees can reduce your cooling bills by 30%, and that's true, but we live in Chicago. So hold on to that fact there, and we'll think about what our energy bills are like. And windbreaks, if you have the opportunity to use them, can be very effective at reducing cold winds and sending snow up and over your home and reducing your heating costs in the wintertime. You need a larger property for that. And I'm going to let Pat talk more about stormwater and the impacts there. I'm very interested in that. There's some general ecosystem services that we know about. And trees capture rainfall, which can help slow its progression through the urban environment, and where it might pick up pollutants, thereby improving water quality, or at least protecting water quality. And in capturing rainfall, we'll let Pat take it from there. But definitely an opportunity for enhancing any stormwater programs that are happening at a community level or regional level. There's a little bit of work done on looking at what trees can do to clean up toxins in the environment. So these are particularly soil toxins. There's phytoremediation is the fancy name for that. And there's a study going on in Oregon where tree roots might uptake pollutants, and then if it can be contained in the tree, that can be handled that way. It doesn't actually eat pollutants, but it can certainly uptake them and help in contamination. Much studying is still being done on that. Simple things like controlling erosion, probably stuff you already knew, but protecting our soil resources, and reducing noise pollution. Some of it perceived, because trees and leaves create a beautiful white noise, which helps block out noise, but some of it is very real when you have a large enough buffer of trees, like along a highway. The trees help, again, make you feel better, and so the noise pollution is an added benefit. Trees are probably strongest for their ecosystem services when it comes to air quality. And again, we ask any fourth grader, this is nothing you didn't know already. What do trees do? Well, trees create, oxygen. They give off oxygen. They help the air, help us breathe. So they absolutely do. The shading reduces what we call the heat island effect, and this is the tendency of a developed area to be 5 to 8 degrees hotter than open countryside, and therefore if you're living in any urban center is going to be a heat island, and your heating bills will be, your cooling bills will be higher, the community will be less comfortable, hot environment or higher temperatures cooks pollutants and it forms ozone. So if you can reduce that heat island effect, this is by community-wide shading, you can slow the formation of ozone. And you can also reduce peak cooling demand. So when it's really hot and brutal is when, in some states like Illinois, you might see that the power gets shifted over to coal-fired power plants for that peak period. And that's very dirty power plants. So if you can avoid drawing energy during those peak times, which you can do if you're controlling heat island effect, that's better for the environment overall. And the other way that trees really improve air quality is by filtering out particulate pollution, and these are the small particles that are most annoying to anybody with respiratory problems. So they're the small particulates are the ones that are filtered out in tree leaves, and the rougher the surface of the leaf, the better they are for doing that. Also, the more leaf surface you have, the better they are at doing that, and I'll get into it when I get into the size of trees that we want to try to grow in a community forest. And just briefly here, an awful lot about trees and climate change. And of course, trees do sequester carbon or take carbon out of the environment in the process of photosynthesis. And they absorb carbon dioxide, give off oxygen. The carbon stays inside the tree, inside food products, and there is contained safely. However, and forests as a whole, globally speaking, are very important in terms of carbon storage. So carbon sink is what they call it. The soils are also very important. Maybe Pat has something on that too. And that's all fabulous and tied up until trees and wood and byproducts decompose is when it's released. So it's a big cycle after that. You don't expect you to see it all, the carbon cycle there. So tree planting programs can be useful in terms of sequestering carbon, but most of the time if you hear a criticism of tree planting programs is that that alone isn't going to do it. It's a tool in helping to mitigate climate change, but you can't plant your way out of driving a Hummer, for example. So just a consideration there. Anybody drive a Hummer? Insult anybody? You're probably not in the talk on benefits of trees if you're driving a Hummer. Okay. So the ecosystem services, the U.S. Forest Service has done an awful lot of work in really measuring and quantifying these benefits. So they aren't magic numbers. They've done an awful lot of work to determine exactly what do trees do in an urban environment. And what they found, this was the first study that we did in Chicago, which was done when I worked for Mayor Daley. The Forest Service came in and very basic study said, how many trees do you have in the Chicago area? Let's figure out what they do. If leaf surface areas intercept particulate pollutants, knowing how many leaves you have, how big they are, helps us in figuring that out. So we call it the leaf area index. You don't have to pay any attention to what that really means other than notice some of the trees at the top. So some of the beloved trees, white oaks would have a very high leaf area index, which would be beneficial. And look at how high Norway spruce is. If you think of it, I'll get into that a little bit later on, but that's kind of an important consideration in terms of leaf surface areas, so think needles of a tree. So that can help guide a little bit what you might want to be growing. And sadly, our ash trees don't seem to have a very high leaf area index. Okay, so this is it. When you got leaf surface area, you got a lot of surfaces here on every needle. So I don't know, anybody particularly good at math? But if you can visualize how much surface you have, the other thing about conifers or evergreen trees is those needles are going to be present all year. So when it comes to intercepting stormwater, these are actually proved to be the most valuable, even though they don't necessarily like water. They've got more surfaces. Would you agree with that? So leaf surface areas increase over time, and the smaller trees have lots of value. The larger trees have exponentially greater value. As trees grow in time, this is the leaf area. That the red oak was considered the large tree. This was a study that was done by the Forest Service. They actually used the Glen Ellyn as a reference city, so they measured some trees and got some information from Midwestern cities. And red oak was the actual tree that they used for a large-scale tree. And if you look at the leaf surface area in years, again, math is not my strong suit, exponentially higher with the larger trees. And this is an important consideration when you start thinking about what we should be planting and growing and whether or not we should be preserving trees, or you know, in terms of thinking about replacement and tree choices that we should aim towards larger trees. So large stature trees are being promoted for all the ecosystem services and a lot of other benefits. We tend to really love large trees. But if you look at life expectancy on a large tree at 120 years, benefits, these are ecosystem services and tangible benefits. Annually, the lifetime contribution of that tree is $4,000 on a large tree. Small trees still valuable, shorter lived on smaller trees. $270 in net benefits. So aiming towards the upper end of these large stature trees, that'd be large when they mature, the ones that we want to aim for. And can you see this chart? Mm-hmm. Okay. So this has more to do with managing for ecosystem services. So let's pick stormwater. Stormwater is the blue one. And if you look at the comparison of benefits by tree types, that's large deciduous trees, medium deciduous trees. We've got large conifer trees, medium conifer trees. The most important contribution, most important type of tree to plant for stormwater management is going to be a large conifer. If you look at the purple, which has to do with property value, your large deciduous trees are going to be the most valuable. Green would be CO2, carbon sequestration. Large deciduous or large coniferous trees are going to be most important. So this can help urban foresters manage the community trees to achieve the benefits that we want to aim for. So this is from the, and this is a summary of some of this Midwest Urban Tree Guide study that was done, looking at cumulative costs, looking at what does it cost to plant the tree, water the tree over its lifetime, prune it, clean up after it, should you have any legal issues if a limb fails, compared to the benefits and costs. Or the benefits of it. These would be mostly the ecosystem services. The social values were not quantified. So this only has to do with ecosystem services. And if you look again, the small tree, you know, great benefits, private tree versus public tree. The benefit cost ratio on your crabapple, the lowest value you can get would be a public crabapple. Would still return for every dollar you invest in it over a 20-year period, you're going to get that dollar back, so it's a break even. So you can't lose money on community trees, that's the good news. If you have that tree in your backyard, you get a better return on investment. Anybody have any idea why the benefits are higher, the benefit cost ratio is better on private trees? It's presumed that it shades the west wall of a home. So the maximum ecosystem service you derive from any urban tree is when it shades the west wall of your home. It's very, very significant compared to all the other ones. The other thing is that private trees will live longer, a lot less wear and tear on them, and it's just maintenance costs longer lived is why the private trees are going to be produce a higher yield. But if you look at, so the large shade tree produces $2.70 to 67 in investment over a 20-year period. Shading that same, the west wall, you're getting back $6.75 for every dollar you invested in a 20-year period. So money grows on trees. So some of the ecosystem services that we have, that I've used in this presentation, derive from the Forest Service study and different types of studies that were done elsewhere. But what's happening here in Chicago, we don't really have a handle on. And when it comes to something like emerald ash borer nibbling at our back door, what are the potential losses? This might help us prioritize and better understand what the urban forest is. And so we conducted a 2010 tree census this year. We've just collected the data. We have no results on it yet. But the tree census is based on a program that was modeled, that was developed by the U.S. Forest Service called iTree. And urban foresters know about it, but this modeling program has evolved from that first one we did in Chicago, and now has an awful lot of maturity under its belt, and there are about 3,000 users of this program nationally, cities in Brazil and South America and China have used this modeling program, as well as many of our neighbors. Milwaukee completed a study of their trees. go out and you measure plots. We took random plots throughout the Chicagoland area, and we wanted to find out how many trees are out there by these estimates, what kinds of trees are there, so we can better predict and plan what kinds of trees, what we might anticipate with the next pest, or what our priorities might be, and how big these trees are. And then what's it worth in terms of the value of the trees? This has to do with that appraisal value that I told you about. And then the function. These are the ecosystem services related to air pollution removal, carbon storage and sequestration, and then energy conservation, whether that is a positive or negative effect. And the reason for that is that for community trees advocacy is we would like to better use this information so that we can protect our tree canopy over time and maximize those benefits to people. The study that was done, we did over 7 county regions, so this was a very large-scale study. We had nearly 1,400 plots. That in the area we covered is a 7-county region, and it's a 4,000 square mile area. So this was a pretty massive study, but we generated dots in space, and then we hired a bunch of college students, some from Western, and they got the really hard plots in the buckthorn thickets. And they went out and they measured the trees. And one interesting component, which Lorena's going to talk about, was that we also took measurements about the wood potential out there in those trees. So should, when we lose the trees, might we be able to recover any type of value from the lumber? And each sample plot was representative of a larger 2.9 mile area, just because it's a sample plot. So watch for results on that later this year. We hope for the results on that, which will give us what are the value of the trees, and we can do at county level, DuPage County, we can do any county within the entire region to determine the makeup of that, how many oaks do we have versus how many buckthorn do we have, where are the trees, and what are their services. So that's my introductory one. We're going to hold questions? Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Peggy. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, our next speaker, as Edith just said, is Lorraine Blessard. Ms. Blessard holds a bachelor's and master's degree in architecture from the University of Illinois and has built a successful plus 20-year practice in the design and construction of buildings and interiors. She is also a licensed architect in Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan with potential for licensure in every state except California. A past chair of the Chicago chapter of the U.S. Green Building Council and its residential green building advocate, Lorraine primarily serves in the role of project architecture / designer and lead consultant for LTLB and Virotecture, in addition to directing the vision and philosophy of the organization. Her experience as Director of Architectural Services for a real estate firm and Senior Associate at the architecture firm are crucial in the success of both the project and outcomes and the cooperation of the organization. Active projects include several LEED for homes collaborations with builders and homeowners, as well as local Habitat for Humanity affiliates. Pending LEED registered / certified projects, one LEED, okay, that's too many.
No, you're going to drink more.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't know where I'm going with that one. Anyway, thank you.
Oh, thank you for coming out. It's a late evening. If you need to stand up and stretch a little bit, I would not be offended.
How do you spell your last name?
Let's see if it can come up. There you go. Thank you. B-L-I-S-S-A-D. Of course, I've been married over 18 years. My husband says it's pronounced Blissard, so he's had it longer than I have. I think his vote counts more. But be that as it may, again, for introduction, I'm also a part of this organization called the U.S. Green Building Council. They recently had a name change. It's now the Illinois chapter, so we're more encompassing than just for Chicago. And what I'd like to do is kind of talk a little bit about urban trees in the context of residential green building. Because I know there's quite a bit of greenwashing out there. Some people think that green homes or just bamboo floors and low VOC paint. But there's quite a bit more to that. And but would like to give you an overview of how trees could actually fit into making your home greener. So what is the U.S. Green Building Council? Well, for one, we're not a governmental organization that's creating building codes and all those crazy things that people are worried about. And we really focus on education, environmental education, how to make your home greener. And it's not just architects, it's not just developers, it's also homeowners. We have consumer education. In fact, we're hoping to come back and do an overview of a couple of our other programs. And in fact, I do know that we've got a program that we're developing on water conservation for your backyard. So that seems to be a pretty popular one. And why is it important? And why am I bringing this up? Thank you, Edith, for talking about the carbon. That is one of the impacts. But also, our homes use 22% of our country's energy. But by building green and making green modifications, we can reduce the energy use, our carbon emissions, our water use, and more particularly the solid waste. There's nothing worse than having a tree taken down and have it put in a landfill when there are plenty of other higher best uses available. Now, why is this demand increasing? The federal and state governments have been providing initiatives, whether it's tax deductions or tax credits, but those are primarily on the energy side, but it's still increasing knowledge. And we now have better sustainable materials. There's a group now that's looking to create third-party verification on whether a product is green or not, because do we really want to take a manufacturer's word for it? No, I don't think so. It's always best to have someone else make that determination that doesn't have a financial vested interest. Other things, consumer motivation. Believe it or not, our children's future is the #1 thing that we've found, and I do have statistics if anybody would like the data that backs up some of these facts and figures. But global warming isn't. It's not the most important thing. So making sure that we're building our homes green, having less impact on the environment, ultimately has that our children's future in mind. And many people are becoming more and more knowledgeable about green homes. In fact, there's been a jump of 16% in the last year. But the main thing, main 3 benefits that people talk about are healthier place to live, lower operating costs, and part of a more sustainable lifestyle. And so where trees fit into this is we can create healthier places to live if we maintain our trees, and also build our homes green, and be more sustainable in terms of our lifestyles to what we do with that tree. So what exactly is a green home? Well, unfortunately, some people think it's this. It's a yurt in the middle of nowhere, completely unconnected. I'm sure the cell service is awful, and we've got a couple horses here, which are probably the original flex fuel hybrids. Unfortunately, some people think it's this. Something out of the Jetsons. I'm dating myself, yes, I'm in my 40s. And unfortunately, there's a lot of publicity out there that there's some platinum homes, LEED platinum homes, which is one of the programs I represent, where they install $30,000 wastewater treatment for the home. And we don't want people to think that they have to do that to build green. It can be very sustainable, very simple solutions. Simple as planting a tree to shade your home so that your mechanical system or your HVAC doesn't have to work as hard. That doesn't really cost anything. And in fact, we're in the process of building homes that are more in line to this. This is the reality, that are affordable for Habitat for Humanity and are also platinum. So what we boil down, residential green building? After talking to the NAHB, which is the National Association of Home Builders, the City of Chicago, which has their own green home building program, and then of course in conjunction with USGBC, we boiled it down to 5 main elements. And looking at site planning, water management, energy, materials, indoor environmental quality, and then education's kind of on the periphery, so we're always educating. So where do trees fit in all of this? Well, when you sit down and do a project, you don't just run to Home Depot and go willy-nilly and start buying materials and without really thinking about what it is that you want to do. So if you have a situation where you're either building or you're trying to do some green renovations, spruce up your curb appeal, whatever it might be, think about what trees you should keep. Are they healthy? Are they infested? Are they invasive? Do they even belong there? Because if you can keep your trees and you can keep them alive and keep them healthy, it's the highest, best possible use. and as Edith already presented, increases your property value. Some of the other things that fit in with our site planning, obviously heat island reduction, I don't need to go over that. Stormwater management is important, but that landscape really increases that property value. And other things people don't consider are the non-toxic pest control. Now, if your tree's already infested, there really isn't a whole lot you can do, and of course I'm not an expert on that, but whatever you can do that's non-toxic, you can save your tree, keep it alive, is the highest, best use. Now, water management, with the green home building programs, it's really more geared towards the inside of the house and irrigation, but trees do have an indirect effect. So if you're planting native species, trees and plants that actually belong in this climate, then they shouldn't have as much of a demand on irrigation as, say, I don't know, something exotic. I've seen some people. Yes. No, well, that doesn't use as much water. But, well, that wouldn't really survive here. But in general, many of these invasive species require more water than is typical for a plant that's more acclimated. Energy management, trees have an effect on energy efficiency. And I know Edith talked about that. She's going to go more into depth with that. But whatever you can do in terms of the outside really does have an effect on the inside. Some of the other things that we advocate are better insulation and air infiltration prevention. But those are higher level classes that we'd be more than happy to offer if people are interested. I don't know if anyone's heard about weatherization, but that's also a part of this. Now, in terms of material use, what are environmentally preferred products? People have heard this quite a bit. I mentioned it a little bit earlier that they're talking about creating these eco-labels and third-party labels. But urban trees have the potential to be a part of this environmentally preferred products. Edith and I are part of an organization that's trying to create a special label for urban trees so that they become recognized in some of these green home building programs. So that instead of having your tree torn down and turned into a landfill, we can create cabinetry. So this particular project, the client chose ash that had been harvested from a tree that was infested with emerald ash borer. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that particular pest, it destroys the bark and the outside of the tree, and which is basically how the tree feeds itself. But it doesn't damage the core wood, which is perfect. And so if you can catch it in time, obviously it's too late by that because it's infested. But if you can catch it before the tree dies and everything rots on the inside, that wood could potentially be used for cabinetry or furniture. This is a table that was put together and showcased in the Rising from the Ashes show that we had traveling. I don't know, are we going to do that again this year?
No, but we do have the program booklet over there.
And it was really well received. Also, you can use it for stairs and trim or flooring. In fact, one of my clients was looking at, they had a couple large diameter trees that they had to remove, mostly for construction, but one of the trees was severely damaged. And rather than just have it be torn down and turned into wood chips, they wanted to figure out a way to use it, and they ended up deciding for flooring and for stairs. And believe it or not, wide plank flooring is pretty popular, and it's very difficult to find old growth trees nowadays. And so they had a 36-inch diameter tree, and another was a 30. So they could create that wide plank flooring that would normally be prohibitively expensive, but because they were using their own trees and they found their own mill workers and sawyers, they were able to have the flooring made that they wanted. And then in this particular instance, it's used as a wall covering. This is the USGBC's new national offices in Washington, D.C. And so this is some reclaimed timber that they actually carved their logo into. Now, what are your options? Because if you don't have someone to work with that is knowledgeable about this, and fortunately for my client, I'm a part of the Illinois Emerald Ash Borer wood utilization team. If you're just a regular everyday homeowner and you're faced with this situation, you have two choices. The first one is maybe you want to donate your wood. Well, hiring a trained arborist is key. It's one thing that they're certified, but even more important that they understand the right way to cut the tree down. If it's cut in little 2-foot lengths and 4-foot lengths, that's not really usable for long flooring or trim or whatever it may be. So if they know the proper way to have it taken down because you're planning on using it or donating it, I believe you have someone trained here in Glen Ellyn in the Utilizer program. So could they perhaps call you for information or call your artist? The other is finding an actual sawyer, and that's what this picture is. This is a mobile sawmill. And what a sawyer does is they don't make the final product, they just make it better. No, I'm just kidding. They cut it into manageable chunks. So it'd be like a rough sawn log. And then finding a receiver, meaning someone who makes something out of it, whether it's a furniture person or another mill worker or whatever it might be. And in some cases, there are nonprofit organizations that will accept the wood as a donation. In fact, my client had some wood left over. We donated it to a local high school, and we were able to get a tax deduction based on that. But if you want to use it yourself, it's pretty much the same process, except having to find that mill worker to make that final product. And our team has been putting together a list of sawyers and mill workers, but it's trying to create that chain, if you will. The arborist to the sawyer to the mill worker. It's a little bit difficult, it's a little bit rough right now, but we're trying to create it in a way that makes sense to you so that you know who to start with and who to end up with. And if you, especially if you want to use your wood, you know, finding credible mill workers and sawyers that are willing to work with you wanting to use your own wood. And that's great that you want to use it if you choose to, but whatever you decide to do, make sure that it's not coated in high VOC type stains or paints or sealers, because that kind of defeats the purpose of being sustainable. And then you bring that into your home and it affects your indoor air quality. So not a kind of, again, looking backwards. So in terms of resources, the USGBC Illinois has additional education, as I mentioned before. And then, of course, we've got our Illinois EAD, or Emerald Dashboard Wood Utilization Team, that has resources on their website. So that's how urban trees fit in with green building.
Thank you, Lorraine. I just went over to the wood utilization table over there and got this beautiful necklace that is made of ash wood. And you could probably talk to Edith and find out where you can get one. We'll wait a little bit here, but I want to say that is a goal of mine as a village forester, is to use the trees that we remove that are solid, other than using them for firewood and chips. We've been trying to do that. We have given I think it was a 32-inch cottonwood trunk to one of the woodworkers in Wheaton. So I don't know what he's doing with that, but you know, it really is a goal that's something we want to be able to do. So if anybody has any ideas, I think Maureen's an excellent resource, and so is Edith. I've tried to contact COD to see if we could give them some of our wood. That's not working out. So, but you know, that is a goal, and hopefully in the near future we'll be able to do that. So, okay, well, let me introduce Pat Kelsey now. I want to say Pat and I have worked quite a bit in the past. He used to work for the Morton Arboretum. He is a principal in the consulting firm with Willsburg Kelsey Associates, located in St. Charles. He has been a consulting scientist for the last 10 years. Prior to that, Pat served as the research soil scientist at the Morton Arboretum. Pat is one of 2 lead designers of the Morton Arboretum's permeable paver parking lot. Pat has also led the design initiatives for trees, soils, and stormwater in projects ranging from the Chicago Lakefront Memorial Park to Harvard University's Green Roof Initiative. Pat is a certified arborist and a certified soil scientist. And like I said, we've worked together in the past, and I really appreciate all the help he's done. And thank you, Pat.
Thanks, Peggy. My name's Pat Kelsey. I'm a recovering scientist. I spent 17 years as a research scientist at the Morton Arboretum, 3 years doing my graduate work. That's where Edith and I met. I probably shouldn't say when I met Peggy. That'll just give me but the community that has come together for people like Edith to advocate trees really has its roots in a group of people who are the generation before us. And Edith and I both have a mentor who passed away earlier this year, Dr. George Ware. And George introduced me to the concepts of stormwater impacts of trees when I was a graduate student. That was December of 1980. I guess I was technically still a senior in college. So it was a while ago. And we've come a long way, but the base understanding of what I like to call the green infrastructure movement has passed over an awful lot of the science and an awful lot of the engineering to quick, simple, catchy marketing phrase solutions that may or may not be real. So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to take a trip through Glen Ellyn and apply some stormwater principles to tree management or to the effects of trees here in the village. See that? So how much water falls in a storm event? What is the volume of water? These are real basic concepts, and I will admit to having turned off the decimal point on my calculator for this purpose because I'm a consultant now and I can do that. As a researcher, I would have taken that out to 6 decimal places. But I'm a consultant now. 1 inch of water produces about 27,000 gallons of water. So in a minute we're going to talk about how many rain barrels would that take in your yard to catch that. And the purpose of this isn't to make fun of green infrastructure technology, but to point out that there are different concepts that we need to embrace when we're going to talk about the use of green infrastructure as it relates to already developed urban infrastructure. And ladies and gentlemen, Glen Ellyn's been here a while. There isn't much that's new. Even an infill development, frankly, doesn't have that large of an individual impact. In aggregate, they may, but the fact of the matter is, this is a developed community. That's about 0.083 acre feet. Does everybody know what an acre foot is? It's kind of a weird term. It is an acre of land, 43,560 square feet, with 1 foot of water standing on the top of it. And it is how we measure flood storage. A 1 inch rain is slightly more than the annual storm or the 1 year return interval of rainfall. And at this point we're talking about just rainfall, not runoff. We're talking about what falls from the sky, what that volume is. We'll talk about what hits the ground and runs off in a little bit here. 7.7 inch is the 100-year rainfall event on a probability basis. We'll go over that in a minute. And that's 109,000 gallons, so nearly a tenfold difference. So how much water is that? Well, for a 1 inch rain, that's 494 rain barrels, or about 123 and a half of them per home if we wanted to have zero discharge. We are currently, our office is rewriting the DuPage County Stormwater Ordinance. And there is always a great deal of give and take between we allow too much to happen and we don't control enough and we're too restrictive. There are a number of people, including elected officials, that want to institute a zero discharge stormwater release from existing development. It can't happen. It's mathematically impossible because even native forests have release of water. If they didn't, we wouldn't have streams. Streams are the outlet. So the natural cycle has in fact an excess in any place where annual precipitation in humid climate, where precipitation exceeds evapotranspiration, you will have streams that will flow, and that is the discharge or the excess water from the system. Well, let's say we wanted to do it with rain gardens. I'm a big advocate of rain gardens. I frankly make a living putting them in. I just built 4.5 acres of them for Lake County Central Permit Facility to demonstrate to developers and homeowners that they can put rain gardens in and make them meaningful. But if I wanted to capture everything in a 1-inch rain, I'd have to put 3 rain gardens per yard. They'd be 20 feet by 30 feet by 6 inches deep. I don't know. You got that much room in your yard to give up? I got a 1/4 acre lot. I actually like some of my bluegrass sod. I admit it. I walk around on Saturday morning without my shoes on. We're all willing to change. We're all willing to embrace things, but it has to be things that are meaningful that we can support. So let's talk about runoff. Most ordinances and most statistical studies, of which DuPage County and King County, Washington, are the 2 most studied areas for runoff in the world. More studies have been done to quantify runoff. So when I tell you that on average new development is 60% runoff of impervious area in DuPage County, that's a fact of life. From 1983 to present. Prior to that, it was about 70% impervious. A little later you go, boy, that's really high. My yard doesn't have that much impervious. Well, you'd be surprised. The fact of the matter is those produce, again, fairly large volumes of water for us to manage. So does it make sense? And there are 2 national companies out selling trees as the stormwater answer. So the question is, are trees and underground storage systems with trees the answer for stormwater management, or are trees just part of the solution? I think you can see where I'm headed. Let's talk a little bit about what happens to that runoff and frequency of events. We've all heard about the 100-year flood, and we had 3 of them since 1987. The reason for that is the 100-year probability flood means that there's a 1% probability of that flood occurring in any given year. If you had a 1% chance of winning the lottery every week, would you play it as opposed to not playing it at the odds that are there now? A 1% probability is frankly a very frequent event. It's just that we use a recurrence interval to try to make it understandable, and in fact, we make it confusing. For Central DuPage County, for the weather station that is Wheaton 3 Southeast, which is Morton Arboretum's weather station, for which for 30-some years a man named Webb Crowley managed it. For a decade I managed it, and subsequent to that, Chris Bochtel and Pete Linsner have managed that station. So I know something about the data from the station. On average from that station, there are 107 days during the year that we have I said rainfall. It's a precipitation event. It could frankly be snow converted to water equivalent. That's 1 inch or less. We refer to those as the frequent storm events. Forget the recurrence interval. There's 107 times a year we have an opportunity to do something about small quantities of water and improvement of water quality. As we rewrite the DuPage County ordinance, and frankly it's my business partner John Wills who is leading that effort, not myself, we and he are focusing on those smaller events. Yes, there's flood control in the ordinance. Don't be concerned. We're not going to let them build a high-rise tower next to you with no parking and not put in stormwater detention. That's not going to happen in this county. The issue, though, is that if we're going to get water quality benefits, if we're going to do something meaningful and keep that water in the landscape where it is of use to us, we need to do something about the small storm events. How much water falls on Glen Ellyn? I'll admit to getting some data today that I'm always scared to use. I didn't know how big Glen Ellyn was, so I went to Wikipedia. I hope I'm at least close to right. I came up with 6.6 square miles, which, having lived here for nearly 30 years, my wife's from Glen Ellyn. We don't live here, but we live nearby. I have no idea. So we're going to go with it's 6.6 square miles for my example. If it isn't, I apologize. That's about 4,200 acres. In a 1-inch rain, that produces 350 acre-feet of water. How many of you are familiar with the Wooddale-Itasca Reservoir? Big reservoir excavated into a quarry in the up on the border between Wooddale and Itasca, and serves as part of the Salt Creek Basin. Anybody know how much storage is in that? Got about 3,500 acre-feet of storage for a drainage area that's frankly more than 1,000 square miles. This is 6.6 square miles, and we're producing 350 acre-feet in a 1-inch storm. That's total volume, that's not runoff.